The checkpoint guard's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "No civilian should be armed," he announced loudly, emptying her bag with theatrical flourish. The crowd watched in tense silence as the woman remained eerily calm despite the growing hostility. When the hidden compartment revealed a gleaming gold Desert Eagle pistol, gasps rippled through the room. The colonel froze, recognition flashing across his weathered face. This was no ordinary weapon. This was no ordinary woman. As their eyes locked, decades of classified history hung between them, invisible to everyone else, but unmistakable to those who knew. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If you enjoyed this story, consider subscribing for more untold tales of hidden heroes and the moments that change everything. The rain fell in a steady drizzle over the Kosovian checkpoint, turning the morning light into a gray haze that matched the expressions of the weary travelers queued in endless lines. Military personnel in crisp uniforms moved methodically through the crowd, their faces hardened by years of civil conflict that had torn the region apart. Isolde Verrey adjusted the strap of her worn leather messenger bag, her eyes scanning the checkpoint with practiced casualness. Unlike the anxious civilians around her, she maintained a composed demeanor that betrayed nothing of her thoughts. Her nondescript clothing, faded jeans, weathered boots, and a practical jacket helped her blend into the crowd of aid workers and locals seeking passage. "Next," barked Lieutenant Tovin, a young officer whose ramrod posture and freshly pressed uniform suggested someone eager to prove himself. His eyes narrowed slightly as Isolde stepped forward. "Destination and purpose?" he demanded, extending his hand for her documents. "Tarivsk, Humanitarian Aid Coordination," Isolde replied, her voice calm and measured as she presented her paperwork. The documents identified her as an employee of International Relief Foundation, complete with appropriate stamps and signatures. Lieutenant Tovin studied her papers longer than necessary, glancing between them and her face repeatedly. "These seem convenient," he said finally, a note of suspicion entering his voice. From his elevated position in the command booth, Colonel Branimir Resnick observed the exchange with detached interest. Something about the woman caught his attention, not nervousness, which was common enough, but rather its absence. Civilians crossing this particular checkpoint typically displayed visible anxiety. This woman showed none. "Step aside for additional screening," Tovin ordered Isolde, gesturing toward a small building adjacent to the main checkpoint. Several travelers behind her shifted uncomfortably, exchanging worried glances. "Is there a problem with my documentation?" Isolde asked, her tone reasonable but firm. "That is what we are going to determine," Tovin replied with the hint of a smirk. "Random security protocol." As she was escorted toward the screening area, whispers rippled through the line. "No civilian should be armed in this sector," Tovin announced loudly, making a show of his authority. "Especially not foreign aid workers who appear too comfortable in a military zone." Inside the sparse interrogation room, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the metal table bolted to the floor. Two armed guards positioned themselves by the door as Tovin gestured for Isolde to empty her bag. "All of it," he instructed, watching as she methodically placed her possessions on the table. A water bottle, a notebook, a small medical kit, protein bars, a change of clothes, a satellite phone authorized for aid workers. Tovin inspected each item with exaggerated care, finding nothing of interest. His frustration grew visible as his random screening began to appear unwarranted. Then his fingers detected something along the bag's interior lining, a slight irregularity in the stitching. "What is this?" he asked, voice sharpening with renewed suspicion. Isolde said nothing, her eyes revealing nothing as Tovin pulled at the stitching to expose a hidden compartment. His expression transformed into triumph as he called out, "Colonel Resnick, sir, you should see this immediately." The door opened moments later as Colonel Resnick entered, his weathered face impassive. "What is it, Lieutenant?" With theatrical flourish, Tovin reached into the hidden compartment and withdrew something that gleamed golden under the harsh lights. A Desert Eagle pistol, its gold-plated surface immaculately maintained despite its evident age. "No civilian should be armed," Tovin repeated, this time with vindication in his voice. "Especially not with something like this." The room fell silent as the soldiers stared at the weapon. It was no ordinary firearm. Its craftsmanship and distinctive gold plating marked it as something exceptional, something significant. Colonel Resnick's eyes moved from the pistol to Isolde's face, his expression unreadable. "Everyone out," he ordered suddenly, "except Lieutenant Tovin and the detainee." As the soldiers filed out, Tovin stood straighter, clearly pleased to be included in what he assumed would be an intense interrogation. Resnick slowly approached the table, his focus entirely on the golden weapon rather than its owner. "Do you know what this is, Lieutenant?" the colonel asked quietly. "A concealed weapon, sir. Military grade. Likely indicates espionage or worse," Tovin replied eagerly. "I was not asking about its classification," Resnick said, his voice taking on a strange quality. "I was asking if you know what this particular weapon is." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Tovin's face. "It is an expensive pistol, sir?" Colonel Resnick carefully lifted the golden Desert Eagle, turning it over to examine a small insignia engraved near the trigger guard, a symbol that meant nothing to Tovin but clearly held significance for the colonel, whose expression had subtly shifted. "Lieutenant, step outside," Resnick ordered abruptly. "Sir?" Tovin's confusion was evident. "We have not begun the formal interrogation protocol." "That was not a suggestion, Lieutenant," the colonel cut him off, his tone leaving no room for argument. As the door closed behind the reluctant Tovin, Isolde and Colonel Resnick remained in silence, the golden pistol between them like a silent testament to something unspoken. Colonel Resnick circled the table slowly, the golden Desert Eagle resting in his palm with the familiarity of someone who understood its significance. The interrogation room had fallen into a tense silence, broken only by the distant sounds of the checkpoint beyond the walls. "Operation Nightfall, 2003, Maravan Pass," he finally said, his voice low and deliberate. Isolde remained motionless, but a flicker of recognition crossed her face, the first genuine emotion she had displayed since her arrival. "I was a junior lieutenant then," Resnick continued, his gaze distant as if seeing through the walls to a different time. "Commanding a forward observation post when insurgents launched a surprise offensive. We were surrounded, outnumbered, with no extraction possible." He placed the golden weapon carefully on the table between them. "The command told us to hold our position until reinforcements arrived. But we all knew what that meant. We were not expected to survive long enough for help to reach us." Isolde watched him silently, her posture still alert but somehow less guarded. "Then an unmarked helicopter appeared just before dawn," Resnick said, unconsciously touching his collar. 4 operatives deployed, no insignia, no identification. They moved like ghosts through the enemy positions. His voice took on a note of reverence. "Within 20 minutes, they had cleared an extraction route and secured our wounded." He slowly unbuttoned his collar, revealing a jagged scar running from his collarbone toward his shoulder. "I took a bullet meant for my communications officer. Would have bled out there if not for one of those operatives, the one who carried a golden Desert Eagle." Resnick's eyes locked with Isolde's. "They never told us your names. Just that if we ever encountered the Golden Eagle, we were to provide immediate assistance, the highest priority, they said." He reached into his pocket and produced a worn identification card. Not his current military ID, but something older, displaying intelligence service credentials. "Before Border Command, I served 5 years in military intelligence," he explained. "Just long enough to learn about Ghost Protocol, a joint special forces unit so classified that most generals were not aware of its existence." The colonel studied Isolde's face carefully. "They said Ghost Protocol was disbanded years ago, yet here you are, carrying their most distinctive marker." A heavy silence fell between them as unspoken understanding passed between 2 soldiers from different worlds. "Nightfall was compromised," Isolde finally spoke, her voice carrying the weight of years of maintained silence. "I am the last one. I need to cross the border tonight." Something shifted in Colonel Resnick's demeanor, a decision made after years of waiting for this moment without knowing it would come. He straightened to his full height and rendered a formal military salute. "Commander," he said with quiet respect. Outside the interrogation room, Lieutenant Tovin paced impatiently, frustration evident in every step. When the door finally opened, he snapped to attention, eager to resume what he still believed would be an interrogation leading to his commendation. Instead, he found Colonel Resnick escorting Isolde toward his private office, their conversation too low to overhear. "Sir?" Tovin called out, confusion and indignation competing in his voice. What about the detainee, the weapon? This matter has been reclassified, Lieutenant, Resnick replied without breaking stride. Return to your post. In the colonel's office, Resnick unfolded a detailed map across his desk. The eastern route through Sokolov Pass would be the obvious choice, he said, tracing a line with his finger, which means it will be watched. I recommend the northern crossing here, near the old mining facility, less patrolled since the collapse last winter. Isolde studied the map intently. And beyond the border? 3 kilometers to this village, Resnick indicated. There is a man named Darovich who runs supply transports. Tell him Resnick says the debt from Karsova is paid. He will provide transportation to Tarivsk without questions. The door burst open as Lieutenant Tovin entered without knocking, still gripping the Golden Desert Eagle in an evidence bag. Sir, I have initiated the weapons violation protocol as per regulation. Lieutenant, Resnick cut him off, his voice dangerously quiet. You are interrupting a classified security operation. Tovin faltered but pressed on. With respect, sir, I observed a civilian with an unauthorized weapon. Your observation has been noted and superseded by higher authority, Resnick stated firmly. This individual is being granted passage under my direct command. That will be all, Lieutenant. Confusion and frustration warred on Tovin's face as he reluctantly placed the evidence bag on the desk and departed, his rigid posture betraying his disapproval. As darkness fell over the checkpoint, Colonel Resnick personally escorted Isolde toward the border crossing, the Golden Desert Eagle now secured in a discreet case under his arm. The situation in Tarivsk is volatile, he warned as they approached the final gate. The peace talks are fragile at best. Isolde nodded. That is why this mission cannot fail. At the border gate, illuminated only by sparse security lights, Resnick offered her the case containing the golden pistol. This belongs with you. She regarded it for a moment before shaking her head. Keep it. If I do not return in 3 days, deliver it to the embassy in Tarivsk. They will know what it means. Resnick accepted with a solemn nod, understanding the weight of what he was being entrusted with. The crossing guards change in 4 minutes, he said. Move quickly and stay in the shadows until you reach the tree line. As Isolde prepared to cross into the darkness beyond the border, she paused briefly. The man you were in 2003, the one ready to die for his unit, he would be proud of the officer you have become. Before Resnick could respond, she had melted into the shadows, leaving him alone with the case containing a golden weapon and the burden of its history. 3 days passed with agonizing slowness. Colonel Resnick maintained his usual routine at the checkpoint, but his attention repeatedly drifted to the safe in his office where the Golden Desert Eagle rested in its case. Lieutenant Tovin had grown increasingly sullen, his perceived undermining still a fresh wound to his pride. On the evening of the 3rd day, Resnick sat alone in his office, a small television in the corner broadcasting the news. He barely registered the reporter's words until a particular phrase caught his attention. Unexpected breakthrough in peace negotiations, the reporter was saying. After years of deadlock, representatives from both factions have agreed to preliminary terms for a ceasefire. Sources close to the talks cite a dramatic shift in the negotiating position of hardline elements, though the cause remains unclear. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. A young soldier entered with a small envelope. Delivered for you personally, sir. The courier said it was urgent. Alone again, Resnick carefully opened the unmarked envelope. Inside was a single black and white photograph, faded and creased from age. It showed a team of 4 soldiers in nondescript tactical gear, their faces partially obscured by shadow and equipment. Among them stood a younger Isolde, recognizable despite the years that had passed. They were posed beside a helicopter, no insignia visible anywhere, but the mission in their eyes unmistakable. Resnick turned the photograph over. On the back, in neat handwriting, "Some fights for peace require silence, not glory." He sat motionless for several minutes, understanding the message and what it represented. Then he unlocked his safe and withdrew the case containing the Golden Desert Eagle. Opening it carefully, he placed the photograph alongside the legendary weapon before closing it again. Walking to the window that overlooked the checkpoint, he observed the flow of civilians passing through, smoother now, with less tension than just days before. Somewhere beyond that border, Someone had accomplished what diplomats and generals had failed to achieve for years. As twilight settled over the landscape, Resnick thought about the nature of true service, not the medals or the recognition, but the invisible victories that allowed ordinary people to live ordinary lives. He thought about all the operations that would never appear in history books, all the heroes whose names would never be spoken in public ceremonies. The shadows lengthened across the compound as day surrendered to evening. In the distance, lights began to appear in villages that had known too much darkness. Colonel Resnick straightened his uniform and rendered one final salute toward the border, a gesture of respect not just for Isolde, but for all those who fought invisible battles for a peace that others would take for granted. The golden weapon would remain in his safe, a secret testament to sacrifice, until the day someone else arrived carrying the burden of silent service. Until then, he would keep watch, understanding now that sometimes the greatest victories were the conflicts that never happened, the peace that descended without explanation, the heroes who walked away without claiming credit. As he turned from the window, he whispered words meant for ears that could not hear them. "The mission continues, Commander." In the growing darkness beyond the checkpoint, life continued. Children played without fear, families gathered without worry, communities rebuilt without the shadow of conflict. None would ever know the price paid for their ordinary moments of happiness, and that, perhaps, was the greatest victory of all. 2 weeks later, as the ceasefire held and preliminary peace talks progressed, Lieutenant Tovin approached Colonel Resnick's office with a different demeanor than before, less rigid, more thoughtful. "Permission to speak freely, sir?" he requested after being admitted. Resnick nodded, curious about the change in the young officer. "I have been thinking about what happened with the woman and the golden pistol," Tovin began. "At first I thought you had undermined protocol for personal reasons. But then I noticed the changes at the checkpoint since that night, fewer security incidents, improved civilian cooperation, the unexpected peace talks." He paused, clearly wrestling with something. "My father served in the Maravan sector in 2003. He rarely spoke of it, but once mentioned being rescued by ghosts when his unit was surrounded. He said one carried a golden gun." Resnick's expression remained neutral, but his attention sharpened. "I always thought it was just a story," Tovin continued, "until I held that pistol. I wanted to ask if the woman was connected to whatever saved my father's unit." For a long moment, Resnick considered the young officer before him, seeing not just ambition now, but the shadow of understanding beginning to form. "Some questions do not have official answers, Lieutenant," he said carefully. "But I can tell you this. There are soldiers who fight wars we never declare, win victories we never celebrate, and bear burdens we never acknowledge. The best service we can offer them is to ensure their sacrifices matter." Tovin nodded slowly. "I understand, sir." "Do you?" Resnick asked. "Because understanding means recognizing that sometimes protocol exists to be followed, and sometimes it exists to be transcended when necessary. The challenge is knowing the difference." As Tovin departed, Resnick reflected that perhaps the legacy of Ghost Protocol would continue in unexpected ways, not through official channels or formal recognition, but through the quiet understanding passed between those who glimpsed the shadows where peace was truly forged. A month later, a new directive arrived from Command Headquarters, promoting Colonel Resnick to oversee border security for the entire northern sector. The official citation mentioned his exemplary handling of the ceasefire implementation, but made no reference to the events that had truly precipitated the peace. As he packed his office for the transfer, Resnick carefully secured the case containing the Golden Desert Eagle. It would remain with him, a reminder of the true cost of peace and the soldiers who paid it in silence. The final item he placed in his bag was a newspaper clipping announcing the official peace accord between the warring factions, the culmination of Isolde's mission, though her name appeared nowhere in the article. Some victories, he had learned, were measured not by who received credit, but by who no longer suffered. 6 months after the peace accord, Colonel Resnick stood at the window of his new office overlooking the Central Security Headquarters in Kazovia's capital. The promotion had come with increased responsibilities and influence, but also with greater political scrutiny. The fragile peace continued to hold, though tensions occasionally flared in remote regions. He turned to his desk where reports awaited his attention: border incidents, security assessments, personnel transfers. Among them lay a thin file marked with a discrete classification symbol he had not seen in years. The Ghost Protocol insignia, nearly identical to the one engraved on the Golden Desert Eagle still secured in his personal safe. Opening it revealed a single sheet with an encrypted message and a set of coordinates. The message was brief. Asset extraction required. Golden Eagle authorization. Resnick checked the coordinates. A remote village near the northwestern border, an area still contested by remnants of hardline factions who opposed the peace. Without hesitation, he reached for his secure communication device, inputting a code he had memorized years ago but never used. "This is Nightfall Survivor requesting Talon support," he spoke into the device. "Golden Eagle verification. Sierra November 30. The response came almost immediately. "Verification confirmed. Proceed with extraction planning." Within an hour, Resnick had assembled a small team of his most trusted officers, including, somewhat surprisingly to his staff, Lieutenant Tovin, whose insight into local tribal dynamics had proven increasingly valuable in recent months. "This operation is classified beyond standard protocols," Resnick informed them in the secure briefing room. "We will deploy under the cover of a routine border inspection. All communications will be routed through my personal channel." As the officers dispersed to prepare, Tovin lingered behind. "Sir, may I ask why I was included? My security clearance is still provisional after the incident last month." Resnick regarded the young officer thoughtfully. "Because sometimes understanding the value of breaking protocol is more important than following it perfectly. You have demonstrated that understanding." Before departing headquarters, Resnick retrieved the Golden Desert Eagle from his safe. Its weight felt familiar in his hands as he secured it in a concealed holster. For the first time in his military career, he was operating on the other side of Ghost Protocol, not as the rescued, but as the rescuer. The journey to the coordinates took them through increasingly difficult terrain as night fell. Their vehicles disguised as agricultural transports moved without lights along rarely used mountain paths. As they approached the village, Resnick ordered the team to establish a perimeter while he and Tovin continued on foot. "The contact will recognize this," Resnick explained, revealing a small insignia identical to the one on the golden pistol. "We identify the asset, extract quietly, and withdraw before dawn." The village appeared deserted at first glance, its small cluster of stone buildings dark against the moonlit landscape. As they moved cautiously through narrow streets, Tovin suddenly raised his hand in warning. From the shadows ahead, a figure emerged, a local elder, his weathered face revealing nothing. "The mountains are cold tonight," the elder said in the local dialect. Resnick responded with the countersign, "But the valley remembers the sun." The elder nodded once and gestured for them to follow. He led them to a small dwelling at the edge of the village where, inside, they found what appeared to be a local medical clinic. On a simple bed lay a wounded figure, a woman whose face Resnick did not recognize, but whose calm eyes held the same quiet resolve he had seen in Isolde. "Ghost Protocol Operative Laris," the woman identified herself weakly. "Mission compromised, data secure." Resnick moved to her side, noting the improvised bandages covering what appeared to be gunshot wounds. "We are here to extract you. Can you move?" "Negative," she replied, her breathing labored. "But this must reach Tarivsk." She indicated a small data device concealed beneath her bandages. "Proof of arms shipments violating the peace accord. Names of officials involved on both sides." As Tovin secured the area, Resnick examined the operative's wounds. "These need proper medical attention. We have a field medic with our team." "No time," she insisted. "Hostile forces intercepted my transmission. They will sweep the village by dawn." Her eyes fixed on Resnick with sudden intensity. "You carry the Golden Eagle." It was not a question. Resnick nodded, revealing the golden pistol. "Then you understand what must be done," she said. "The mission above the operative. Always." Before Resnick could respond, distant engine sounds reached them, vehicles approaching from the north. Tovin appeared at the doorway. "Sir, multiple contacts moving toward the village. Heavy weapons signature." Laris struggled to sit up. "You must go now. The data is everything. If it reaches Tarivsk, the peace will hold. If it is lost, war returns." Resnick made his decision instantly. "Lieutenant, help me move her. We take her with us." "Protocol dictates," Laris began. "I know what Ghost Protocol dictates," Resnick cut her off. "I also know what it cost Isolde and the others. Not this time." As Tovin helped secure the wounded operative for transport, Resnick contacted his team. "Change of plans. Medical evacuation required. Prepare for possible engagement during extraction." They moved swiftly through the village, the elder guiding them toward a concealed path that would bypass the approaching forces. As they reached the edge of the settlement, gunfire erupted behind them. The hostile forces had arrived sooner than expected. "Cover position," Resnick ordered, directing Tovin to continue with Laris toward the extraction point while he and two officers established a defensive line. As bullets struck the stone walls around them, Resnick drew the Golden Desert Eagle. Its weight balanced perfectly in his hand as he returned fire with precision, buying precious minutes for the extraction team. When their ammunition ran low, Resnick ordered his men to fall back while he maintained position. Alone now, he found himself reflecting on the night years ago when Ghost Protocol operatives had sacrificed themselves to save his unit. The circle was complete. A sudden lull in the gunfire gave him the opening to retreat. As he moved swiftly along the concealed path, a single shot rang out. Pain blossomed in his shoulder, but he continued without breaking stride, the golden pistol still gripped firmly in his hand. He reached the extraction vehicles as dawn began to lighten the eastern sky. Tovin had successfully delivered the operative to the field medic, who was now stabilizing her condition. "Data secure?" Resnick asked, ignoring his own wound. "Yes, sir," Tovin confirmed, "and our exit route is clear." As they departed the village, Resnick handed the Golden Desert Eagle to Laris. "This belongs with Ghost Protocol. It has done its duty here." The wounded operative studied the legendary weapon before shaking her head. "It was entrusted to you by Isolde. It stays with you until the mission is complete." "And what is the mission?" Resnick asked. "Peace," she replied simply, "for as long as we can secure it." 2 days later, in a secure medical facility in the capital, Resnick visited the recovering operative. The data she had risked her life to secure had already resulted in the arrest of several officials and the interception of weapons shipments intended to reignite the conflict. "Ghost Protocol is changing," Laris told him. "The old ways of operating alone in the shadows are giving way to something new. Isolde saw it first, the need for bridges between the shadows and the light." "Is she alive?" Resnick asked, the question he had held back for months. "In a manner of speaking," Laris replied cryptically. "She serves differently now, but she remembers Nightfall, and she recommended you personally for this extraction." As Resnick prepared to leave, Laris added, "The Golden Desert Eagle has always been more than a weapon. It is a beacon passed between those who understand that peace requires both shadows and light. Isolde knew you would understand that when the time came." In the months that followed, Colonel Resnick continued his official duties while occasionally receiving cryptic messages with the Ghost Protocol insignia. Sometimes they led to quiet interventions that prevented violence before it erupted. Other times they simply provided information that helped him navigate the complex politics of maintaining peace. Lieutenant Tovin, now promoted to captain, had become his most trusted officer, though neither ever spoke directly about the true nature of their occasional special inspections along the borders. The Golden Desert Eagle remained secured in Resnick's safe, alongside the photograph of Isolde's team and a growing collection of small mementos from operations that officially never happened. It was a reminder that some forms of service would never be acknowledged with medals or public recognition, and that perhaps those were the forms of service that mattered most. 1 year to the day after Isolde had crossed the border at his checkpoint, Resnick received a small package containing only a handwritten note. "Some seek glory in war. Others find honor in creating peace. The mission continues, Colonel." The handwriting was unmistakably Isolde's. He carefully placed it in the safe with the golden pistol, another chapter in a story that would never be told but would always be remembered by those who carried its legacy forward in silence.